I'm Jim Check. With me, Scott Deedles, and this is the Bitcoin Show. Through thick and thin, through sleet and snow, we're here all the time, no matter what. I guess this would be a snowy, sleety day for Bitcoin. But, some people, my daughter phoned me up and she said, Bitcoin's on sale.
We have done this before, and I mean, personally, I have done this before. I've been through a number of, Bitcoin drawdowns, and I think and so why Bitcoin people tend to you kind of get used to it. Like if you're going to be holding Bitcoin, you need to kind of come to grips with the fact that every once in a while there is going to be a really violent down day or period of days, and doesn't make it any easier. But so far in the history of Bitcoin, none of these days has been the nail in the coffin, and eventually the dust kind of settles, and it resumes a march upward. And so typically these days, these kinds of days end up being the things that harden Bitcoiners in their resolve. And as you personally experience one and it doesn't go to zero, then you get more conviction about buying it and feeling like it is a sale price instead of the end of the world. So yeah, I mean, if it's a lot of skies falling, you tend to see like really baseless headlines return on stuff like this, like, oh, Michael Saylor is about to get liquidated, and all kinds of things that just aren't true. And yeah, at the end of the day, they can never make any more Bitcoin. They're going to be continuing to make more and more money. Nothing about Bitcoin, how the technology or the software works, has fundamentally changed. And markets are irrational. We were talking offline. It has been just generally a very weird time in the markets. Metals last week tanked abruptly. There's a major NASDAQ sell-off this week that was correlated to some news about the most recent Anthropic product being released. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty in general, and Bitcoin is super liquid, right? So, if somebody had, $10 million in silver, it's not like they can just walk down to their local silver shop and sell that off. And if they were to try to make orders like this, they're going to see a lot of slippage in the kind of pricing that they can get. And this is actually part of what makes Bitcoin great, but it also produces days like today, because Bitcoin is incredibly easy to sell because it's digital. You can sell it to anyone, anywhere in the world, and at any time, 24/7. And the buyer doesn't need to know who you are, and they don't need to evaluate Bitcoin because there aren't like grades of Bitcoin like there are grades of gold. It's all the same. And so what happens is the same thing works in the positive way. And when we have these crazy green days for Bitcoin, guess what? It works both ways. And all of a sudden, when sellers start piling on, and this has been something that's been building for really kind of like 2 or 3 weeks. Bitcoin had what looks now like a massive kind of dead cat bounce to start the year, going from the low 80s back up almost to 100,000. Didn't quite get there. I think when it failed to reclaim 100, that was sort of the end of the continuation thesis on like the last maybe bull cycle. And, myself included, I thought we were probably going to head back upwards towards a new high, partly because of what the metals market was doing. But with that rejection around 98, it's like, we dropped to 94, we dropped to 87, we dropped to 82, we dropped to 75. And, I think right now what's going on is a washout on a bunch of liquidity, and we'll see Bitcoin try to establish a floor somewhere. My thought is it'll be something kind of in the 50,000s, based on sort of like that's now a new major. We've talked about Bollinger Bands and we've talked about trading ranges. If you zoom out to sort of the 5-year chart, that kind of like high 50s, low 60s becomes sort of a range.
Can you pull that chart up, actually, that I just threw in the doc? I'm just going to throw up the chart, the current chart there.
Yeah, so you can see that line actually continuing, it's there in that chart. We're sort of right around the previous cycle all-time high, which was 69,000 in 21. But if you can see there, there was a broader range you're as you zoom out in time, right? You're looking in larger bands of price.
Yes.
So
I would
this
say
this
like from
go.
I used to trade technically, and I would look at this chart today and I would say, this is, again, I haven't traded technically for a long time, so take this with a grain of salt. Um, those two previous highs back in 22, 21-ish, form a floor, and I
Mhm.
would say that you're at the floor right now. And especially there's a high there. Do you know what I mean? Back in July of 20, like July 24 kind of thing.
Yep.
Those should form a floor, and then there's that steep drop, and then if you look in that big jump there, so those are like gaps that need to be filled, and so it's done that where it went up there in like 2025 where it shot up right there, and I think that was the election actually, right there where it shoots up,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then it just comes back down. So I mean, if you're a technical trader, this looks interesting as a floor. Because what's below this floor is a lot lower, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, so it all
Yeah.
depends on where you think things can go. Because below this one is, the next floor is 17,000,
Yeah.
right?
Which, yeah, nothing's impossible. And,
Yeah.
but the likelihood of that, I wouldn't
So,
put
man, so
my,
this makes a pretty strong case for floor, right?
yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. So we'll
Take
see,
that with a grain of salt. I don't know.
yeah. And the other sort of marker that traders tend to look at is RSI. And that number right now is like the highest it's ever been. And one of the big Bitcoin sell-offs in recent memory happened at the start of the pandemic, where Bitcoin dropped down to 3,000, and the RSI today is actually higher than it was then, which was at the time a really unprecedented drop. And that drop did end up with Bitcoin going from 3,000 to 69,000 over the next year and a half. So we'll see.
So how's Michael Saylor doing? What's anything from him?
Actually, right now, as we're recording this, is a strategy earnings call, and so I imagine, it's probably uncomfortable. But Saylor's a pretty incredible guy. The guy has a lot of backbone, and I believe he's not unbothered. We've talked about these different products that they IPO'd last year that are, converts on preferred shares at certain prices that pay high yield. So one of them right now is paying 11%. Those products are really not tied to the Bitcoin market. So they're tied to people who are looking for an 11% yield. And they're still bringing in tons of money, and they're still buying tons of Bitcoin. So they made a big Bitcoin purchase last week. And Saylor was on TV earlier this week saying, basically, they've got 700,000 Bitcoin now. They do not need to sell at any price, basically, 17,000 maybe, but, and nothing in the range that we're talking about. So they're definitely looking at Bitcoin on sale. And what he said was, if they get to 1 million Bitcoin, that's basically their model shows $1 million Bitcoin. And if they can get to 1.5 million Bitcoin, they think that's a $10 million Bitcoin. So, basically every Bitcoin that Saylor buys reduces one person who can own a whole Bitcoin forever in their view. And they're buying, they're eliminating whole Bitcoiners, future whole Bitcoiners, like, a couple thousand at a time.
Is there any other negativity out there? Is there any whales that you've seen movement, or anybody that's selling out? Have you seen any of that?
The one piece of negativity that I think is worth addressing, Jim, is that a few Bitcoiners, a few famous Bitcoin developers were apparently named in different Epstein documents that came out last week and early this week. And I've had more than a few people reach out to me, ask me, is there any validity to this? Is Jeffrey Epstein Satoshi? And
I doubt that, but yeah.
I also doubt that. The most important thing, I think, so there has been some perceptual negativity around that story. But there's a couple things that really are concrete and matter. as to whether or not, like, there's some kind of backdoor, secret trapdoor that was built into Bitcoin, or, it's Jeffrey Epstein all along. It's like a Scooby-Doo where they pull the mask off of the red herring. First is that Bitcoin's code is open source. And so anybody who's really interested is able to get under the hood and view how the code works. And people have been doing this obsessively for 17 years. So if there was something fundamentally hidden in the code, the likelihood that nobody would have found it by now is incredibly unlikely. It's not that complicated of a code. And the other piece is that the way Bitcoin works, Bitcoin has a few different separated mechanisms of how the network operates, and one of them is something called nodes, and nodes are essentially copies of the Bitcoin rules that people run on computers in their home, and the nodes are collectively what enforce the rules of Bitcoin. Nodes have the ability to accept or decline different proposed changes to the way the Bitcoin rules work. And we see this all the time. This is how Bitcoin's ecosystem is continually evolving to meet the market and change to, change with technology. And so really, it's node runners and the consensus among node runners that determine how Bitcoin runs. And that's something that no individual person, including Jeffrey Epstein, could control. So again, this is just kind of like, it's a baseless thing, but he's an infamous name. And so people, I think, totally, tend to get caught up in this stuff.
Well, I think a lot of people will just put Bitcoin, I mean, Epstein's name on anything right now, so that if they want to be derogatory, right? So they've been throwing it at Elon Musk, they're throwing it at Trump, they're throwing it at anybody. So, I mean, right?
Yeah.
Saylor would have had to be a busy guy to do all those things all at once, right? I mean, it's not Saylor, sorry, Epstein.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there's definitely a lot of people who have photos of, that they maybe wish they didn't, but nobody, nobody controlling Bitcoin.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff thrown out there right now to probably likely cause some smoke for some of the people that are actually implicated.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? The ones that they want to distract you by, I look over there while I start building my island, right, so that I can hide there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right now there's a whole market drawdown, and that includes the stock market, and that includes gold, silver, and Bitcoin. So there's a definite drawdown, and we see these, and I believe these are healthy drawdowns, because I mean, there's no big world event that you could look at and say, oh, that's it. You know what I mean? There's no war that's broke out. There's nothing that is, like a black swan out there. So these are just opportunities I would look at, and say, if nothing's changed fundamentally, and whether that's a stock or it's a precious metal or a Bitcoin, if nothing fundamentally has changed, you look at these opportunities as opposed to, the house is on fire.
Yeah, totally. And for all of those assets, like you mentioned, and this is a very Bitcoin way of looking at the problem, but asset prices over time have to go up because money is fundamentally designed to become less valuable. So part of the reason assets become, and they do this at different speeds depending on their desirability, the performance, but ultimately, scarce and valuable things tend to go up partly as a function of money becoming less valuable. And that's not going to change. That's definitely not going to change. And the likelihood that problem is going to accelerate is probably pretty high. So, long term, as Bitcoin, as silver, like we were talking about offline, are these things going to go higher, and probably a lot higher? Yeah, I think so. And so is the price of a cup of coffee. We'll be paying $10 for a cup of coffee too. And that's a function of how money works as much as how markets work.
Somebody just said this first time I ever heard of a dead cat bounce, but yeah, dead cat bounce I played the penny stock market forever when I was a youngster. And dead cat bounce is, not a good thing, no, dead cat bounce. But dead cat bounce, I would refer that to RIM stock. I remember when RIM was like Canada's darling stock, $150, and then went down to like 10, and people were phoning me, should I buy it? Should I buy it? And I said, that's a dead cat bounce. They said, well, it's on sale. I said, leave me more on sale when it's $1.
Totally. I mean, and that's a good thing to point out, Jim, because this is the difference, right? Like, Bitcoin is collateral, it's money, it's something people use. It's actually provably growing in adoption, the number of wallets that exist, the number of people who are using it. It's a technology, and nothing has changed about the technology in the way that, RIM got outfoxed on touchscreen phones and, obsoleted themselves by thinking that they had a monopoly on secure messaging. So these are not the same things. I think, like, when we're talking about dead cat bounce here, that we're talking about, like, chart patterns, not the death of an idea.
Yeah, and I mean, again, now just if you could put that chart back up there. I mean, if anybody here that's watching and commenting here, that if you're a trader, I don't know if you want to interpret those results any differently, but you see that line that I put in there, that looks like a pretty good floor. So we'll see. I've been doing this show with Scott now for probably around the time it was 50,000. No, I think we started around when it was
earlier. Yeah,
somewhere in there, right? And
I mean, the very first time we did one of these was a live episode, not related to the Bitcoin show, but Bitcoin had crashed, like, from 60,000 to 16, and
there you go. Yeah.
That was one of these days. Like, I think it was right after the first time we did one of these, and it was a Bitcoin versus gold thing. Bitcoin didn't die. This is the other thing that was going on. Like, 2025 was the first year that there wasn't a major news headline in the history of Bitcoin proclaiming that Bitcoin had died. And prior to that, this is something that was happening, pretty regularly. I think there was over 450 major news outlet articles in the first 15 years of Bitcoin, making Bitcoin obituaries. So 2025
CNBC
was the
did
first
a funeral for it. I think CNBC did a funeral for it live, and they did a funeral. I think it was around 12 or 15, somewhere in there, in the teens anyway. They did a funeral for it.
Yeah, so it's like, people aren't talking about death anymore. It's a big crash. You know what? It's an asset that's 17 years old, and it went from $1 to 60,000 US or whatever now, and it goes up and it goes down, and it trades with a more, volatility than some of the other assets that might make people a little bit, more comfortable. But Bitcoin's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and then like gold and silver as well. I mean, silver ran I never thought I'd see 100 plus silver, and it's off today by a lot. And that's the thing, when things sell off, they sell off huge because it's all the profit takers that want in there, and then there's all these, you talk about options, and that's all in the Bitcoin market now too, right? There's options that they trigger, and they can see, the algorithms can see what's below them, right? They can see market. I used to have, when I traded a lot, I used to see market depth, right? So you can see all the buys and sells in there, and so you trigger them, and that's how you get these precipitous drops, right? So they flush the market, which brings in more selling, right? More selling pressure, and it's the same way on the upside, right? And that's why things run, right? And then the old saying in the old trading market was like, never get in the way of a speeding train. That means don't get in the way. Don't put your order in when a market's going up. Just wait, right? So that's, as a trader, you got to sit on the terminal, right? Otherwise, you don't want to just trigger your things if you're trading any type of volume. Whereas, if you're doing small things, it doesn't really matter, right? But
yeah, and Bitcoin's on a stock, right? So nobody can halt the trading of Bitcoin. And this is why, buckle up probably tonight when Asia wakes up as we're going to bed, because they're just going to start doing the same thing. And this is a feature of how it works.
Yep. And that's one thing. It's one of the few things that trades 24/7, 365.
Truly 24/7.
And then I know they're talking about doing that with precious metals, but precious metals goes to sleep on the weekend. And then plus there's two markets, right? You have the New York market and the London market. So they kind of like switch, as one closes, one opens, right? So, but Bitcoin is the, I don't know if there's anything else yet. I know they're talking about doing some other stuff. And there's some aftermarket stuff now on stocks. Some of the NASDAQ stuff trades aftermarket and that, but Bitcoin's the only thing that trades 24/7, 365. And I'm sure there's people out there that know when there's like an arbitrage, know when it's, like stronger in Asia and weaker, and different, when it's stronger and weaker in different markets, right? So to really see what the world's saying about Bitcoin, you really have to look at it for 24 hours.
Yeah. And I think, like, well, we'll see. these periods tend to, like anything, it'll settle down. Sellers get exhausted the same way buyers eventually do. And, I think ultimately we're headed into a midterm election cycle in the US with a Republican government with their backs probably against the ropes. And nobody's going to want to see asset prices and portfolios down in September. So
I do want to say, I did say this a while back when all the ETFs were starting, when BlackRocks and Vanguards and all them, JP Morgans and all got involved in here. I said, careful what you wish for, because these guys just like to manipulate the gold market and the silver market. They've been doing that forever. Is that, it was different when it was just the Bitcoin market. When these guys get in there, they do a lot of fancy financial instruments and do a lot of fancy things, and they can move the markets in different ways, and especially spoof a market too, right? I mean, many of them have been charged, and some of them, like fined massively for spoofing markets in metals and stuff.
Oh, totally. And I think for Bitcoin especially, like the profile of people who own it is really transformed as a result of these, mainstream institutional products. Bitcoin started out as being something for, computer nerds, online gamers, and drug dealers. And, that sort of transformed over time. And over the last 5 years, I think, BlackRock's got a 3 or 4% allocation recommendation for the conservative portfolio. So you're starting to see normal people buy it. But the flip side of that is that, a lot of those portfolios automatically rebalance. And if something goes up or down, they get sold. Those people who are buying it are, indifferent to Bitcoin probably, and they're just looking for a certain return. So I think this is definitely a new dimension in how Bitcoin is traded. And, those are big money markets. We're also, so it'll be interesting to see how the behavior of it evolves over longer periods.
Yeah, I'm just watching the tick by tick. It was tough. That's why I don't do it anymore. It's tough, like being a day trader.
Yeah.
You watch the tick, right? And then, there's good days and bad days, right?
Yeah, I do not have the stomach for this stuff, so I don't try to do it. And I'm a buy and hold investor because I know I don't have the stomach for it, man.
Yeah, I'll lose whatever hair I have left. And but that's you were a trader one time, I guess. That was a cheap joke, eh? Hey.
Yeah, I'll take it.
There you go. Maybe we'll just leave it there. But like some people right now are seeing this as an opportunity if you're a technical trader. Or you can actually right now we have the advantage that we didn't have before. You don't have to go read books like crazy to understand trading. You can actually throw a picture of this, a screenshot of this into ChatGPT or Grok or whatever you want and ask for some technicals. And I've seen some of the stuff on markets, on stocks, and the in-depth analysis that it provides is unbelievable. And Grok, if I was going to recommend one, I'd throw it into Grok because they've had some contests. And Grok has kicked everybody's butt in stock trading. So
cool. Yeah, I think like the other thing, maybe as a closing thought on my end, Jim, is like with Bitcoin, just like any other asset, you're never going to time the bottom. So if you like Bitcoin and you're interested, it's definitely cheaper than it was. Could it go lower? Yeah, for sure. Could this be the bottom? Yeah, very possibly. So, we'll just have to wait and we'll see when we do this show again next time what happened.
Yeah, just for the entertainment here, I'm just throwing this in here, and let's see what it says real quick. Let's see what our friend says there at Groksville. Sharp correction phase. Blah, 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 blah. Well, like I said, support levels, 60 to 63,000.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we puncture 60,000 today.
Oversold signals emerging. Like I said, like this is the floor. Short entry is on weak bounces. Failed retest 65, 68. Target 60. Zone first, then 58. Wait for confirmation. Use tight stops. It's great. Like I said, the floor looks. I did a lot of my trading just with a ruler, right? You just take a ruler and draw some lines. That's the basics of trading. Just take a ruler and draw some lines. And like that line I put in the chart, you put that one up one time. See that? You putting it up? Yeah, there you go. That's basically take a ruler and draw a line. That's the floor. The ceiling is up there, way up there, right? Way up there, as they say in the Friendly Giant. There's the ceiling, but there's resistance. The first resistance is going to be around that when it tried to test 100,000 again, right? You see there where it failed?
Yeah.
That'll be its first test again, right? So it has to break that and then continue on, right? So those are the technical trading things to watch for, right? 80,000 is a test as well. So 80, 98, and then higher, right? And 100 is that psychological number, right? So that there'll be a battle at 100 again, for sure.
For sure.
It's just a psychological battle number, and that's just the way the market works. Just like you're seeing in the stock market right now, 50,000, right? That's a battle number. That's why it's fighting there. The index itself, like they've had the Dow, is banged on the door several times at 49. I think the year high is 49,653. 50,000 is a battle. I remember when the Dow was fighting for 5,000. Jeez whiz.
Assets always have to hit higher highs.
There you go. Anyway, thank you, Scott, and thank you for watching Now Media. Hey, Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Jim.